Welcome to this debate. The motion before the House is this House would ban recreational gambling. I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister to open the case that stands in his name.
Madam Speaker, I'm going to talk to you essentially about two main points. Firstly, who is most harmed by gambling, and secondly, why this motion is going to work. But first I'm going to give you a little bit of mechanistic detail. So basically we're banning all recreational gambling. So that means if the church hall can't run their little tombola instead, like we don't care, have a bake sale, that's fine. We're going to extend a lot of we're going to have far more controls on like money transfers. So like your British bank won't be able to give money to a gambling site full stop. Therefore, like even if you can get around any measures of removing gambling sites from British territories to go and use foreign sites, like you still won't be able to gamble on it because your credit card company won't allow the money to be paid to them, so they won't let you use it in effect. So we think that's going to be pretty successful. We think that's pretty good. Okay, so like who's mainly harmed by this? Like mainly the poor that go into gambling. Like they effectively do this. They're effectively wasting money that essentially they don't have. They do this basically because they can't necessarily balance the harms. They see gambling as essentially a quick way of gaining massive amounts of wealth that they currently don't have. For the poor are essentially underpaid and working very manual jobs, manual and demeaning low-paid jobs, which in reality they see gambling as an effective way to clear a lot of their issues and get out of it. Like the poor tend not to be particularly educated and therefore don't have a skill set to remove themselves from the situation they're currently in. So for example, like they don't have, like the poor tend not to be doctors, so like they can't remove themselves by earning more money that way, so they're effectively trapped in it. So they see a quick way of getting out, effectively gambling, so they do that. Like we think this leads to harm in itself. So like when you're spending money on gambling, you make a loss, you then remember that you've made the loss and you want to try and get the loss back. It leads to loss chasing. So in effect, you're trying to remake the money that you've already lost. So you spend more and more and more and more reckless with the limited resources you already have. We think that effectively this allows to break that cycle. It effectively prevents you from gambling and therefore stops you from continuing chasing the loss. Yes.
Don't you think that if we ban gambling, the poor people will still need that hope that they will get out of their troubles and seek for gambling in the free areas of the market?
Well, like we think that's the point of education, isn't it? Surely to allow people who are in poor circumstances to achieve a method of getting out. So that's really just an argument for reinvesting more in the education system. Which, like, not against, we can do that if we like the thinking. Okay, so like we think this is a harm through the loss chasing and spending money that effectively you don't have. We think this leads to other harms, such as relationship harm. So you know your partner's going out and spending money, but you don't even know how much it is. They might say they're only spending like 20 quid gambling at the casino, but there's no real way of knowing that it's 20 quid, not 200 or 2,000 or anything like that, or even more. Like we think this also has a knock-on effect on dependence to children. Like children require things for like their educational benefit as well as their social benefit. And when parents don't have necessarily the same resources as this hampers a child's development. So if they don't have books, often poor people can't afford, like it's going to hamper their educational benefit and therefore hamper their ability to move up the social ladder. But like we think like their social benefit is also massively important. So we'd like them to be able to go out with their friends, spend money and go on social trips and activities like that, which can't be done if money is effectively being funneled away by their parents. So like, why do we think that this is going to work? Because effectively, at the moment, the problem with gambling is that we see a lot of adverts on TV that it's very easy to get. So when you go into the supermarket, you see the signs for the lottery saying this week's prize is 136 million euros or whatever it is. Like we think that it's become very, very that it has this veneer of social acceptability promoted by the ease of advertising. When it becomes illegal, the advertising won't be so readily available. It'll be far less. You won't see this. You won't see the advertising for it. So this veneer of social acceptability will effectively start to disappear. So when people stop seeing it as a socially acceptable means of spending money, they won't spend as much on it. So we think that like some people will probably go into like more extreme forms of gambling, spending far more, but we think as a whole less people will be gambling, therefore we think we've actually made a net gain in the fact that we result in less people gambling. Yeah, so like we think the effectively the social acceptance is going to be brought down by the fact that like there's the lack of advertisement, the lack of advertisement and the social promotion that you see currently through TV and easily being able to walk into shops, small shops, supermarkets, and circumstances and various other places. Where it's easy to obtain a ticket for the lottery or whatever. Yes?
Okay, taking the visibility away of the gambling industry is going to make it very difficult to control and actually protect the people who will be involved in gambling because they want to feel how.
Yeah, but like as I've already explained, like the problem with gambling is that it is so socially seen as fine. Like when the number of people decreases, it doesn't matter that a few people will be spending more and will suffer possibly a slightly greater harm. We don't think that's so important because in reality, the sum total of people's decrease, therefore we think it's actually a net gain as the harms are substantially decreased. Okay, so what have I talked to you about? Like I've talked to you about who is effectively most harmed by this. It's effectively the poor who are spending money that they don't have, and this has knock-on effects like with relationships and specifically with dependents and children who rather than maybe using better manners in better ways to like try and remove them from poverty rather than fixing their hopes on this very slim chance of winning an unseen amount of money. Like we've explained as to why we think this is going to be effective, because it effectively removes ads on TV and the quick and easy accessibility by walking to small convenience stores and shops. Like we think this removes the veneer of social acceptance and that in reality it's more exposed to what it is, and that people are far less inclined to actually get involved in it. And even if that results in some people having more harm, some people going to more extreme forms and therefore having harm, we think the fact that far less people will participate in it, I think that's a net gain, and therefore we invite you to see the proposition.
I'd like to thank that speaker for his speech and welcome the Leader of the Opposition to open the case that stands in her name.
Ready? Yep. Okay. Thank you for the floor, Madam Chair. In my speech today, I will be offering two main points. The first one is going to be about the right of choice and why doesn't the government have the right to ban us from spending our time and money on gambling or whatever we want. And my second point would be about the nature of gambling and about why, then again, is it not a bad thing to do in itself. But before I move into my substantive, I'd like to start with some rebuttal. Okay, the Prime Minister said that the poor will be most affected by the ban and are most affected by gambling. But I'll argue that yes, the poor are probably going to be the most affected by the ban in a negative way. And my partner later on will explain to you why this is going to happen. But we believe that like poor people who you say do not have equal opportunities with the rich and like the privileged are more likely to go for the quick money in gambling. And we say yes, but that's because they want the hope of it. They want to have this hope that the world is going to be a better place. That's why we spend money on cinema tickets. That's why we spend money on books. That's why we read fiction. People need this thing, this release from the reality, which might not be ideal for everyone. So we believe that gambling is actually a very, very, very good thing because it gives you the hope that everything might be alright at the end. Okay. Another thing I want to say is, you said that parents are going to spend money on gambling and over the books that they're going to buy their kids, and we want every kid to have equal opportunities. Well, your solution doesn't really address this problem because parents can spend their money on cigarettes and alcohol to escape from the reality they live in, and like the extreme poverty and the lack of education and books for their children. Your solution of banning gambling, we feel, does not adequately address the problem you try to tell us is going to happen. So now I want to talk about my main points. Firstly, the freedom and right of choice. Okay, so everyone has the right to choose how to spend their time and money. If you earn your own money, then you, as a cautious and a sensible individual, have the right to choose how to spend them. and what to do in your free time. You can choose to go to the cinema and spend money on your cinema tickets, you can choose to go traveling, or you can choose to go gambling, because a lot of people get an enjoyable thrill of the possibility of winning money. They enjoy that. Yes, sir.
Does my right to personal autonomy allow me to sell myself into slavery or allow somebody to chop my arm off?
Well, in gambling, we do not feel there is such a big harm, because gambling in itself, and as I'm going to explain later on in my second point, is not addictive in a physical or metabolical way. So gambling in itself can be done reasonably. So you can go and gamble on like the score of a football match between like your favorite football team and another team, and this might actually increase your enjoyment. And if done reasonably in a reasonable manner, then gambling would actually be beneficial for you. Moreover, some people actually enjoy gambling in like a social circle. They go to bingo halls, they go to horse races, they have their circle of friends around these things. And like the Prime Minister said that like these will be, they want to take these out of people. Well, some people might be very hurt from these things, because you're taking away their friends, you're taking away their choice to spend time with these people doing the thing they love. We believe that can be extremely harmful, and it is more than likely that these people will try to find a way to still do these things, even around your mechanisms of banning their credit cards. I'm going to take cash out and give it to someone to bet on my favorite horse, or on a series of numbers in a bingo. So we believe that because of these things, banning gambling, you have the right to gamble, and the government doesn't have the right to take your right to enjoy your free time as you wish. So my second point, the nature of gambling, and why is it so different from the things that the government might have the reason to ban. So gambling in itself is actually pretty harmless. You go and give some money on something you enjoy. You might not win, and most people are actually aware of it. There is less than 1% of the people who are gambling who are addicted to it or have any problems. Moreover, there are support systems for gambling problems, so it's actually a pretty safe thing to do with your money. We spend money on tickets for the cinema, as I already mentioned. We spend money on a lot of things, and gambling actually, if done reasonably, gives you the chance to win something back. So we believe it's not so bad in itself. Moreover, gambling is not in itself addictive. It's not like smoking or alcohol or drugs. You cannot get physically addicted to it and have like symptoms of getting away from it. If you are going to argue that everything that you can get addicted to and harm you should be banned, then why shouldn't we ban gyms? Because a lot of people will go excessively to the gym and will start being harmed by the effects this is going to have on them. They're going to buy supplements and things that are going to harm them in general. So we believe that we should invest money in educating people about how to do things reasonably, rather than ban things and spend a massive amount of money in trying to regulate the market, which is bound to reappear, as my partner will later on explain. So what else is so important about our case? We believe that gambling can be very, very good for some regions as well, because it will make like this hope of rejuvenating the region, because it invests money in the region. Gambling in itself is going to have like the effect of getting people together around things that they might enjoy, and it is incredibly good for them to do it, and therefore we believe that the government shouldn't have the right to do this, take this away from you. So what did I tell you today? I told you that everyone has the freedom to choose whatever they want to do with their free time and their money, because they've earned them, and you should not ban them from doing so because you feel it's harmful. As we already proved that doing it in a reasonable way is not harmful in any physical or like psychological way. So we've proved that it's actually a recreational activity like any other, and we believe everyone should have the right to do it as they wish, and the government does not have the right to take it away from us. Thank you.
I'd like to thank that speaker for her speech and welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to continue the proposition case.
It's two main points of substantive today. The first one to talk about is why there isn't a right to gamble, because we believe that rights only exist because they facilitate human flourishing. Gambling doesn't do this for all the reasons which Ryan brought you. We're also going to tell you why gambling is something which we can take effective action to ban, perhaps unlike, say, alcohol. And at this time we'll also go over again why gambling is quite so dangerous. First, on some points of rebuttal. So we've had, there are plenty of things parents can spend money on which are bad. Well, yeah, if they're bad, then we should try and stop them spending money on that too. Things like alcohol, due to how deeply socially entrenched they are, perhaps we can't do that. But yeah, we think it's easy to deal with. I'll deal with that by substantive. So, okay, so there's this idea that gambling is harmless because most people aren't addicted to it. Well, even if it's true that most people aren't addicted to it, at the point at which somebody who doesn't have very much money is spending what little money they do have on that, and this is negatively impacting them in a significant way because they can't afford things, particularly if they can't afford things for their children, then we think that even this non-addictive gambling is a significant social harm. Furthermore, a lot of people are addicted to gambling because it's an inherently addictive pursuit due to all the things which Ryan has told you about, due to the fact that it offers a way out when it appears to offer a way out when one is not available. Furthermore, like the reason this is sort of an analogy where people get addicted to lots of other things too. So, one, it's more addictive than lots of other things. We tend to ban things which are highly addictive, like say heroin. Also, it's something which intrinsically is damaging by being addicted to. If you're addicted to going to the gym, you at least, might get a bit buff out of that. If you're addicted to gambling, then you're just throwing away huge amounts of money. This is why it's important it's addictive. And even if it's only a minority of people who are really seriously harmed by this, then that would be sufficient reason to ban it because it harms them. We don't actually think it is a minority. We think that because many, many people from low-income backgrounds are doing this, and because they're wasting money that could be spent elsewhere, then therefore it is a significant harm we should deal with. Okay. Why is there no right to gamble? So I PLI Cat and I say, why do your rights? Why does your right to autonomy not let you to sell yourself into slavery, or not allow you to let somebody chop your arm off? Well, this is because rights only exist and rights are only legitimate insofar as they facilitate human flourishing. And we usually give people rights. We usually say people should have rights to certain autonomies, to freedoms, because we think they're generally best placed to make decisions about their own happiness. So, perhaps your choice of career, your choice of who you marry, you're generally probably the best person to do that. So often the state is bad at enforcing these things and making these decisions for people. However, when there are decisions which do tend to lead people to terrible actions, when there's decisions which are so rarely good decisions, the decisions which would usually lead to terrible consequences, we stop people being able to make. This is why we ban drugs, for instance. You don't have a right to autonomy with that. Okay, so why? So and this is, again, why, for instance, you don't have a right to sell yourself into slavery or to allow someone to chop your own arm off, because these are decisions which would so very rarely be in your self-interest. If they were in your interest at all, we just don't think people should have the right to make them. Yeah, Joe.
Well, yes, but gambling is very rarely in your heart, as we...
I think we've adequately dealt with this. I'll go over it again at the end of the speech if necessary. It is an enormous harm, and therefore we have the right to ban it. Okay, let's talk about this a bit more. So, why is it the case? Why is it that rights can only exist insofar as they promote the general good? Because anything else would be utterly crazy. So in a situation in which, say, a bomber has planted a bomb in a city, millions of people will die, you say, well, he has a right not to be tortured. We think that obviously in this circumstance the correct decision is to torture him to save millions of people. There are also bizarre circumstances if we try and put rights above this general, above the good. The good must always come first, and this is why rights are supplementary to that. So why does the state have a duty to do this? So we believe that to act morally is to promote the good. So the state is a collective endeavour of all its individuals. The state should therefore, in the same way we're obliged to act morally and promote the good, the state should promote the good. The state does this by giving us rights when it promotes our own interests, such as certain rights to freedom and autonomy, and it's in certain spheres, whereas in this sphere, we don't believe that giving people the right to do this does facilitate the general good. In fact, it does the exact opposite. Okay, therefore, we have no right to gamble. Why do we think then, on my second point, why do we think we can effectively ban gambling? Okay, so Ryan's talked to you about the fact that there's a veneer of respectability around gambling, which encourages lots of people to do it. It's the fact that the lottery, it's for charity. I just buy a ticket when I go shopping. It's something which is normalised, something which creeps into people's lives. There's also the fact that, say if you look at the way in which online gambling is marketed, there's the idea, it's just like a bingo hall going to with all of your friends. Whereas in reality, something you're doing alone, you could potentially be spending huge amounts of money on it. And there's this veneer of respectability, which when it is legalised, allows the people who manipulate, the people who are behind gambling, wealthy people who are focusing on trying to expand this industry, to manipulate people into playing. This means a huge subsection of people who would not otherwise play, so people who have families, people, you know, who consider themselves to be, you know, respectable, you know, the elderly, whatever. All these people end up gambling. Whereas in a situation in which the only way they could gamble would be to take part in an illegal card game or get involved with, like, organised criminals, they wouldn't do this. Therefore, due to the, well, when we ban it, okay, some people will seek out gambling, many people won't gamble, there'll be a lot less gambling occurring, which is a good thing given all the harms that we've talked about, less people get addicted to gambling, etc., etc. Okay, so why do we think that we, again, this is possible? So, potentially banning something like alcohol may be very difficult, due to the extreme level of social kind of entrenchment of it. You know, people drink when they go to the pub, people drink when they, you know, people drink to celebrate, whatever. We don't think gambling, although we think gambling is facilitated by this veneer of social acceptability, we don't think it's reached the stage yet where it's so deeply entrenched in culture that we can't take effective action to prohibit it. So therefore we don't think that this any analogy of alcohol prohibition is a real analogy. We see many states do effectively ban gambling. Many states in the United States, you know, a Western liberal democracy like the ones that we're setting in this, have successfully managed to ban gambling. We just don't think that enforcing this is an issue. Okay, so in the last 40 seconds of my speech, let's go over again why gambling is so tremendously harmful. Okay, so we believe that often people, so we believe that another harm which I think was focused on quite as much is that this kind of undermines relationships. So if you're in a low-income background, if you don't necessarily have a lot of money, your spouse could be going to a casino, you know that gambling is addictive. You know the fact that when people spend money, they're likely to, you know, it's loss leader, so they might chase their losses. They might gamble, they'll waste some money on it, they'll be, oh, how do I reclaim this? I put yet more money on it. We also know that gambling is highly addictive. It's due to another reason why it's addictive, which we didn't quite talk about, is the fact that it's perceived to be glamorous. There's a cheap, instant thrill from it. When you're from a low-income background, you're all more likely, because these are things which you don't get. You don't get many opportunities to enjoy. You don't have a particularly glamorous life. These things lead you to make the poor decision of gambling. So for all the reasons I've told you, there's the fact that you have no right to gamble, because it's something we can enforce, and because gambling is so terrible, we beg to oppose this motion.
I'd like to welcome the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to continue the opposition case.
Mr. Speaker, gambling as a hobby, as something people can legitimately and irrationally choose to do, we don't feel there's any necessity for government and any right for government to actually intervene and say, no, you can't do it. Basically, first of all, a few rebuttals. Well, we're saying there's a lie on everything, right? So there's a lie pretty much on every kind of action people do. Once that lie is exceeded, there will be harm for some human beings. But we say that lie should be left for people to decide. So like if one person feels it's fine to do it themselves, he will do it. It's like our government's duty is like to intervene by the point when they feel like people cannot decide. But in this case, gambling, the lie in gambling works exactly the as like the lie in gym, in fishing, in any kind of like activities you choose to do. We don't feel it's particularly problematic, right? And second of all, rights are only rights when they're beneficial for human beings to flourishing. We say, no, that's just fundamentally not true. Because human beings just do not like at me as an individual. I do not have an obligation towards whole human beings. I only have an obligation towards myself. The reason I give up some of my rights is that under harm principle, I sacrifice some of my rights in exchange for the protection from the government, for government's guarantee that I can pursue my own happiness. I can pursue whatever I feel is happy to do. Like why don't we still on this point they haven't proved to us why this is particularly not good for me if I feel gambling is I feel happy when I do gambling. And sort of they said, well, people just can't spend well, I don't know, they talk about how we make gambling invisible so that people will stop doing it. But the thing is spending a lot of money into gambling has already been stigmatized in the society. So we really people will be perfectly aware of the fact that when they, by the point they started to kind of spend money in it, they will be aware of the accumulated factor that will come after. Because this kind of phenomenon has already been stigmatized, and we don't think it's problematic at all. So what I'm going to told you is that why this policy is not going to work at all, and also it will lead more harm in the future, especially to poor people, right? First of all, why this policy is not going to work? Because people just love gambling, right? Like the nature of gambling is that there's something that you don't know up until the last point, up until the last second, and before that second, just don't know it. Well, that just creates a sense of excitement. Like people just love it. Like there's just no way for you to ban it. So we believe when you actually set up, you are prohibited to do it. People will just do it, like try to find a way to do it. So you just drive those gamblers into black markets, into those dodgy places, which are not regulated by the government. A very good example can be raised being the Ukraine, right? Like Ukraine has tried to implement this policy before, but what came out is that loads of illegal online websites and loads of illegal casinos coming out and cause harm to people. Why we believe it's better to legalize and regulate gambling rather than driving gamblers to poorly regulated foreigners and those kind of places? Because we think those people that are incentivized to break the law and offer the kind of service to you are those criminals who only care about profit, who do not regulate it by law, because by the point they decide to break the law, they're not regulated by law anymore. Also, they're also not regulated by social morality. They're just cruel and they do whatever they can to gain the benefits. So instead of following the contract or regulations they said before, if you don't pay us that amount of money, we'll just send collectors to your home and take out your sofa. They will just say, well, come, it doesn't matter if you don't have that much money, just come and have some fun, we will not harm you anyway. But then it turned out to be in the end, they will just send gangsters to chase you over all of the places, or to actually chop off your limbs, right? This is where harm comes from. And we feel this is better. Why it's better to put it in open places and underground? Because in open places will be discussions around it, right? We'll make people aware of the fact, and also we'll make people aware of all the loopholes in the system, and also will improve the system in the long run. And this will not be gained by the grey area created by the desensitization of illegalized gambling. Go.
Do you think the mother of two who plays online poker, buys a scratch card, all this stuff, is going to seek out the illegal mob-run casino, which would be in a very seedy part of town, very dangerous, etc.?
That works exactly. That's what we were talking about, right? We want to guarantee, we want to give them maximize regulation. We want to guarantee that people enjoy those kind of activities in the safest way. Essentially what we need a comparison, which one can provide better services, which one can improve the system in a better sense, right? We believe that the government can do that, regulation can do that in a better way, right? Second of all, why this is essentially detrimental for poor people? Because we have already, Kat has already illustrated to you, right? Poor people, especially poor people, they need this kind of hope. Because in the society, we have this kind of structural or institutional unfairness in the society, right? It just have a seat, please. It's just they have to, those poor people, they have it's just really hard. Even if they work really, really hard, it's just really hard for them to climb down the social ladder, right? Because it's just really hard due to the all kind of system thing. And we try to change the system, but it cannot be achieved in a short run. In this case, we believe hope can be a good thing in the sense once poor people go and get a lottery and he knows there's something to hope for, and then he can come back to his real life and stay do stuff work every day, do the autonomous life in the hope of in some kind of hope provided by lottery. And also we believe once you ban it, they will just drive them to those kind of dodgy places I've talked about and be taken advantage of it. And those poor people are essentially more vulnerable to this kind of criminals because they're just less protected by society, right? And also, even if they are not even if they do not we believe they will spend this amount of money on other places, right? So it's better for them to spend this money on, say, social and national lotteries, which will essentially, like, in return, benefit them because the profits generated from national lottery will be devoted into the society in return, like, for gallery or stuff like that. So, ladies and gentlemen, because this policy will not work, because this policy harms poor people, we proudly oppose. Thank you.
Thank that speaker for her speech, and I'd like to thank all the speakers in the top half of the debate. I'd like to welcome the Member of Parliament to continue the proposition case.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My two main points today are going to be that gambling is not a rational process, so it's beyond human understanding. So, on that basis, it has to be banned because it's not part of individual processes. And my second point is going to be what can be done by the working classes who are disproportionately affected by gambling if they have the additional money that they spend through gambling in their pocket. But firstly, I want to start with some points of rebuttal. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition said that people, in entering into society, sacrifice some of their rights in order to achieve happiness and protection. But on that basis, gambling adversely affects so many other people in society who aren't actually involved in the act, such as family members, as Ryan said, or partners, or husbands, spouses, or whatever. It can affect people from all kinds of different situations. So they're not being protected in this instance. No, thank you. They're not being protected in this instance. The government is failing in its obligation to protect citizens because these people aren't being protected. They're being adversely affected by something that they have no control over. So government, in order to fulfill its obligation to protect its citizens, has to act and has to intervene and has to ban gambling. Secondly, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition said that if we ban it, it will drive gambling into the black market. But as Deputy Leader of the Opposition said herself, people love to gamble. People will gamble regardless of whether it's legal or illegal. So by that measure, they'll be driven to these dark places anyway. They'll be driven into the hands of loan sharks, into the hands of gangsters in order to get the money to take part in gambling. So on that basis, the harms would exist whether gambling was legal or gambling was illegal. So that harm is completely irrelevant. And so going on to my main substantive points. Gambling is not a rational process. So people go to bookmakers, they buy their lottery tickets, knowing that the chances of them winning are minuscule. They know that the chances of them winning are so small that there's more chance of them dying on their way to buying the lottery ticket than there is them actually winning the lottery. So it's not a rational process that they're going through. No, thank you. It's not a rational process that they're going through when they gamble. They realise that they're going to lose, yet they do it anyway. So this is not them exercising their agency. This is them being coerced. This is them being exploited by processes that are completely beyond them. They're completely transcendent to, no thank you, they're completely transcendent to individual processes. So they're not exercising their agency through gambling. They're being coerced and they're being exploited. On that basis, it should be banned. Because, I'll take you in a minute. Because people, when they're told that there's a 1 in 100 chance of them winning when they gamble, they're less likely to gamble than if they're told that they're going to be randomly selected. So it is just completely irrational, them gambling. So they're abiding by processes that are transcendent to human understanding, and on that basis should be banned.
According to your logic things should all be banned. Then in that case, if I like a boy, like irrationally, I'm aware he will not like me. Should you just ban me from liking him?
No, but there's no harms to that policy. The only harms to that would be to yourself, but there's 3.5 billion other boys in the world. So I don't really see the harms in that statement at all. Which brings me on to my second point. People, on average, in the working classes, are probably going to spend around £5, £6, whatever, on gambling per week. And that's money that they're getting no use out of. They're essentially just throwing that money down the drain. So what could they spend that money on?
Sir.
What could they spend that money on if it was in their pocket? They could spend that money on self-development, self-improvement, education, actual proper sources of aspiration that are going to move them up. So this policy is actually socially mobile because it unlocks realistic possibilities.
Sir.
I'll take it in a minute. It unlocks realistic possibilities of aspiration that are completely legitimate and these people can actually pursue in order to improve themselves. Yeah.
Why do you think they'll spend these £5 on something like books rather than something like alcohol or like drinks that will just vanish and something that's just gonna have the same amount of enjoyability to them that.
But even if they spend on alcohol, they're getting utility out of that because they're able to socialise with their friends. They're able to drink a pint in the pub with their friends and socialise, and they're getting utility out of that, rather than gambling, in which they're just essentially throwing money down the drain. No, thank you. If gambling is the most harmful use of their money that they can use it for, because they get no utility out of it at all. Whereas there's extremely limited benefits out of alcohol, but the benefits are more than if they gamble. So they'll be able to use the money more productively through not gambling than they would if they gambled. So what's the point in allowing them to gamble? So to summarise what I've said today, gambling is an irrational process. It's completely beyond human understanding. They're coerced into gambling by forces that are just completely transcendent to human understanding. So, and in addition to which, if they didn't gamble, they would have more money in their pocket. And if they have more money in their pocket, they can spend the money on more beneficial things, such as education, self-development. Even if they spent it on a pint in the pub, they're still getting utility out of it because they're socialising with friends. And gambling offers absolutely no benefits in terms of the money they spend. So on that basis, we beg you to support this motion.
I thank the speaker for his speech, and I'd like to welcome the Member of Parliament to continue the opposition case.
Right. Okay. Basically, our points are mostly about the economic benefits of gambling to like the wider community and how this like negates like any individual. Like, I'm going to start with a little bit of a rebuttal. Right. So like, basically conceive like social kind of like, you know, bingo hall gambling is like completely fine. Like that's not really a problem to anybody, right? And it's like addictive gambling where you spend all your money that you're going to spend on food is kind of a problem. But all of the measures they put forward to try and solve this, to like deal with social gambling, like the point is that like it will be addictive gamblers who go to like loan sharks and stuff, and they'll be put in more danger because like legal gambling dens, and they'll be put in more danger than like than people who, they'll be put in more danger because of the measure than they otherwise would have been, right? Also, like, quickly to deal with your money wasted point, like, we've already said social gambling is like a thing, socialising with your friends, like, down at the bingo hall is like a thing, so, whereas, like, alcohol actually damages you and that, it kind of destroys your liver if you do it a bit too much, whereas gambling has no, like, physical effects on your body. So, like, out of the two, I'd say that, like, pint at the pub is probably worse than, betting on the
On that point,
very good.
there is a means to the end of my pint in the pub. I go there to socialise, to be with friends, and enjoy the scenario. Most gambling is done on my own in a shop, not socially.
But that's not true because, like, as we've already said, like, quite a large amount of gambling is social gambling. It's like a church umbrella. It's like, a bingo hall. Like, that's not true because you can also just like go and drink by yourself. Like, you can send the analogy. Okay, so on to my points. So, like, basically, we say that gambling has like incredible regenerative effects for like the communities that are in it, which are communities which are often like quite poor, right? Like, which are communities who are often quite like poor. So if we take this like at like a low level, so like local gambling, local betting shop, like employs people from the local community, employs people that like with probably not very many qualifications, because you don't need very many, so like it demands a lower level of qualifications than like a skilled job, so it will employ people from the local community. Those people can eventually rise and become have higher jobs in the firm, and it is therefore like a way of like advancing social mobility like any other job, right? We also say that because of the fact that gambling is so highly regulated, and because of the fact that there is such like a large social aspect to gambling in the way that there isn't to like drinking, like there's a large aspect of like the church tombola, the national lottery, like gambling, which has like an ultimately a social like benefit that like a lot of people benefit from it who otherwise would just be like spending money and damaging their livers or whatever. Like the national lottery gives money to poor people, essentially. Like the and otherwise that money would be essentially wasted, and that's not something that's good.
If people don't have money to spend, if people can't spend their money on gambling, or spend on other things like, say, going to a leisure centre, buying commodities, these would all employ people.
Yeah.
What's the unique benefit of gambling?
We're saying that gambling is like the reason why poor people are disproportionately affected by gambling. The reason why they gamble more than any other segment of society is because they have quite hard lives, right? Like they need a release from their lives more than other people. If they don't gamble, like going to a leisure centre is less a release than other like less well looked on like social things like buying drugs or like drinking a lot. Like people who need that kind of release, like are not going to just like pop up and buy a book, Like it's not like the kind of it's not like it's like not that kind of mentality. It's not that kind of mentality, right? We also say that this brings like economic benefits to entire regions, right? Like places that are formerly big places that are formerly known for gambling are now known for like just generally being entertainment places that built like an entire tourism industry, like Las Vegas, right? So we say that gambling is not the only thing that we say that areas which initially regenerate through gambling then have the potential to become big entertainment complexes, entirely regenerate the area, will completely it has the potential to completely transform the area in a way that other things don't, because of the thrill you get when you gamble, right? And because of it being like a really fun thing to do. And we say that like this potential can then be transformed into other things, can then regenerate the area as a whole, and so basically for like economic benefits on a small level and on a larger scale, we take you to oppose.
I'd like to thank that speaker for her speech, and I'd like to welcome the Government Whip to summarise the proposition case.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tom. I'm going to be summing up the case for the government, saying that we should ban social gambling. Right, I want to be going over 3 main points of clash that I've identified in this debate. I want to talk about this idea of, do we in fact have the right to gamble as individuals? Secondly, does the government have the right to ban it, separate from that point? And then finally, what is the net effect on the so-called poor, right? Is this going to have a net harm to them, or will it benefit them? So I want to take apart all those 3 points and show why the government has taken all of those. I do want to begin on some points of rebuttal. So, in particular, we've got this strong idea going down this table, on this side of the table, sorry, that gambling gives hope. And I want to be tackling this in my substantive as well, and say how this is a really terrible thing. But in particular, I want to say this is not, even if it's true, right, this is not a good kind of hope. This is an artificial hope. This is the hope where everyone knows they're playing a game and they're going to lose. This is the hope where everyone knows that they're most likely not going to win anything. They call it a tax on stupidity for a reason, guys. It's because that's why people don't play this game. It's the game you're going to lose, right? So we really don't feel this is true. And if this is an idea to keep it in, like as an artificial hope, first of all, we think money is better. No, thank you. As my partner Jamie has established. But second of all, that this really smacks of 1984, right? I'm going to use gambling to control the masses because it gives me artificial hope. We really don't enjoy that idea on the side of the table, so we don't think that this is a very good point. But we've also got this idea that in a more passive way, people love it and they enjoy socialising, and that in itself is a means to let it happen. But we also don't feel this is true. Like, people enjoy cockfighting until we decided that wasn't very necessarily a good thing to do, so we scrapped that. And so we again feel this falls back on the points predominantly made on the top side of this table, that just because it's nice doesn't mean it's the right to do. Finally, we have this idea that it won't work, right? We're going to drive it underground. No, thank you. And driving it underground is bad, because you're going to say they're going to do it at all costs, because they can't stop, because they're addicted. Like, it really sounded like what you were trying to tell me there was people are in fact addicted to gambling, which is the point we have made on this side of the table, and you keep flip-flopping between China's arms, no thank you, right? So I really feel like I want that summed up at least before the end of the debate. So is gambling addictive or not? We only make this case very strongly that it is, no thank you. Not in a physical way, not in a chemical way, but in a psychological way. And we really do feel this is true. And in fact, it was even totally reflected in Jamie's substantive, right? The points that he made. But we'll go into that, right? Okay, so I want to talk about the first point, right? Do people have the right to gamble as individuals? Now, the ops arguments really came down to these 2 main points, right? That it's my choice, right? What I do with my money, what I do with my time, and that it's not addictive, right? So we don't feel that this is true, okay? We don't have the right to gamble because you don't have this choice of freedom. As Jamie has already explained, he's said to you that it's a psychologically addictive event, right? So that already blows down this idea that you're not addictive. This is addictive in the sense that I might do stamp collecting, I might collect bottle tops, right? I've got to have one more pull of my gambling lever, right? This is something I'll do even though I'll lose, right? It's illogical, it is irrational, and therefore there must be something wrong with the process, right? It must be addictive in some way. So we don't feel that's true, right? And we also have this idea that they're not it's not inherent, right? It's not social good. So that was nice as well. But so we didn't feel that right. But then it meshes up with the other contrasts, right? Of the idea of why it's okay to go to the gym, because there's not this net social harm, which Jamie also mentioned. So we feel we really won that point to begin with. So I want to follow up this much more interesting point, right? So does the government have the right to ban it? So even if, it's a bit questionable on the front side, that as we as the government, do we have the ability to ban this, right? So again, we come back to these same ideas on op. We want to say that, no, it's my choice, it's none of the government's business. The second one is the idea that it's not addictive. Well, again, we've won the addiction point, right? So I want to scrap that right there. But then there's one this idea that it's my choice, right? It's my choice what I do with my money, it's my choice what I do with my time, it's my choice what I do with my social engagements, right? Well, as James' staff kind of showed, we feel that this isn't true, right? This is a lie that's been presented to you by the industry, which is on this fact. And that in fact, you do not really have a choice as whether or not to gamble. Because as James has stated, this is an irrational process, right? If this is a choice in your own mind, it's like you weigh up the pros and cons, right? Am I going to win? Do I enjoy a false sense of hope? Okay.
It is a rational choice of me to put £1.50 per week for me to enjoy the football game more because I'm more involved in it, and I make this rational choice even though I know this is going to be probably lost in the lottery, and that's what Jamie told you. He told you that you know.
You've got to be dangerous with this idea of probably lost. You must say for saying definitely lost. Like Jamie says, you're more likely to be killed. Like really, chances are you'll never see this money again. We don't feel that this is the example of a logical choice. We don't feel this is an example of a reasonable, well thought out decision. No, thank you. And therefore, if you are not capable of making a reasonable, well thought out decision, then it's the government's job to do it for you. Because there are these net social harms, which Jamie has gone through, and these guys have established, right, that it really falls into the government's camp to be able to tackle this problem. So, yeah, we really do feel that that flows on nicely from that. We're saying it's an irrational thing, that people are going to, that it smacks of this addiction, and that, oh yeah, but this final idea here, right, so let's build on this issue from before, this idea that gambling is a social activity. No, it's not, okay? The majority of people who make money, no, wait, let me explain this to you, right, okay, because we've already said that most of the money is made from the poor in society, right? The poor do not go to casinos and blow large wads of cash, which is what a casino relies on, right? Most of the money from gambling is made in my local supermarket, right? On the scratch card, so you can't really argue with this, okay, this is true. However, if I'm making most of my money, most of my gambling, in the shops, doing a scratch card, that is not social gambling. I'm doing that on my own, right? This is gambling for gambling's sake. This is a perpetual cycle of just trying to saturate this own personal need. So we don't feel that any of these arguments to do with sociability of gambling make any sense, because in the vast majority of cases they don't work. In the few cases where they do these kind of social things, we're going to sort of this idea of harm to the poor, right? So do you have a net harm to the poor? We feel that, as Jamie's already shown, I'm taking money away in a game that I can't win, right? It's much better if the government bans this, right, and people have the money. Maybe you're right, maybe they'll spend it elsewhere, I don't really care, like, it's their own decision. The point is they're not spending it on this, which is a complete waste of their time and money. We're taking away this artificial hope, I stress, because you can have much better hopes, as we've already established on this side of the table, like, geez, get a proper job, do education. We don't feel like any of these economic arguments stand, right, because we kind of feel, again, if you're moving the money out here and moving it into other areas of the industry, it's like, this is money people want to spend just off the fly. They'll spend it on coffee if social effects are that important to them. I just don't feel that holds at all. Do people have the right to gamble? We've established no. Does the government have the right to ban it? We've established yes, because individual people can't make their own rational decisions. Finally, is it going to have a net harm to the poor? We feel it will have a net harm to the poor. The so-called benefits just aren't true. Thank you. I urge you to vote for the proposition.
Thank that speaker for his speech, and I'd like to welcome the opposition whip to summarise the debate as a whole.
Okay, so there are three main points of clash that I come up in this debate. It's the whole free will versus government intervention, and do the government, so can they intervene on things. Secondly, will a black market come out of banning it, or will, like the government say, that it will stop most people from gambling? And lastly, the economic benefits that will come with it versus the waste of money. But firstly, I'm going to have a bit of rebuttal from the summary of the government. Firstly, you said about the whole idea of that you wanted to know what we think about the minority of people that gamble. And we think there are a small minority of people that do gamble and they are addicted to it. And you asked about this, that you said, are we saying people are addicted or not? And there are a small minority of people that are. And we think your policy totally ruined it for these people, because as we've already discussed, they're going to go further underground and they're still going to carry on gambling. You have not, on any side of the government, actually said what you're going to do to help these people who are suffering massively from gambling issues. We say, instead of banning it, you should educate these people to try and help them through government, through gambling issues. And that is the sort of intervention that should come from the government, with restrictions and things like that, to try and help the minority rather than just to shove them underground. And we think that banning it is very, very bad for the minority of people who are addicted. That is in a very small minority, but we do need to think about these people, and banning would be bad for them. You talked about it being an irrational process as well, about gambling being an irrational thing. Depends what kind of gambling you do to start off with. Some things you can gamble, win or lose. That's 50-50 maybe you've got on it. It's actually quite high chances. But you're talking about lottery and stuff like that, and accept it. It is an irrational process. But at the same time, as we said, lots of things are irrational processes. And you can't just say we're going to ban everything that's irrational that hurts us, because we would be banning so many things and it just wouldn't work, making this policy not effective and not workable. Because you can't work it, because irrationality, if we look at everything that's irrational, you can't ban all those things. Just because something's irrational, it doesn't actually have a harm on people. I could go and put £1 down on the lottery. I could do that once in my life. That is an irrational moment that I had. It's not harming me. It's like £1 or whatever. I don't know how much the lottery is, but it's not harming
what I'm doing with my rest of my life. Therefore, the harm is so limited that we do not think it is. We do not think this idea of irrationality actually is a good argument. Okay.
But we've established it harms other people, it harms partners, it harms children, it harms others who aren't gambling.
In a really, really small case, and as I said earlier, we should put restrictions in to help this. We should educate people against gambling to help this. We can't just ban it. Well, you can ban it, but as we said, it's very bad because this just shoves people underneath the ground. They fall into this, as I'm going to talk about, sort of black market idea. That was one of the main points of clash that came up. So going on to the main points of clash in this, there was sort of a free will versus government intervention that came up on the top half of the debate. So basically, we think that we have the liberty and we have the liberty to do what we want, and we have a free will and autonomy to do what we want. And we think that people should be able to gamble. The harm is not that bad, and we can flourish. We can sort of flourishment is not necessarily that key to this debate, as Henry sort of talked about good and the good that comes out of it versus the harm. And we think that people need to sometimes be able to, we can't just look at consequences of the good all the time and the flourishment that you get from the good. Instead, we need to look at the idea of the liberty and the autonomy that people have. And we think autonomy is really, really important to allow people to do what they want. And we're going with the side of autonomy because we think that as we've said, we think that the bad consequences that come are very, very minimal. And this brings me on to my other point of clash, that's the economic benefits that comes that my partner talked about. We think that there are great economic benefits that come from gambling. We talked about, employment that comes with it. And we think this is really important, especially as we've had lots of arguments in this debate about poverty and about the poor being the ones who are affected the most from gambling. And we think if we can get these people into employment, that's good for everybody. They're in employment, they're getting jobs, that's going to make their lives better. And also the government are paying out less benefits and things like that, so it's making the government position better. Therefore, it's effectively helping the whole of society. Okay.
So people can't spend money on gambling, and they'll spend money on other things which also employ people. Why is there any particular economic benefit to gambling? If we want to regenerate an area, why not just build an entertainment complex or build a supermarket? Why does it have to be a casino?
Well, if the casinos are already in place, if they're already there and we need people to fill the jobs there, isn't it better to have something that we're not going to put loads and loads of money into making, like your entertainment complex that you discussed? A lot of money would have to go in there, and it's better if casinos are already there, already helping the community, being a good thing for the community. People already go to them, people want them there, then isn't it better putting jobs into the casinos there? So we think that it's really beneficial, and we think these benefits definitely outweigh the negatives that people have talked in this debate about wasting money, about gambling, causing the poor to be poor and everything. And sort of as well, the other things that go with gambling, like tourism and everything, I think my partner discussed that really well, and we think these benefits are really important, so we think we've got to stick with this. So basically, the main points of clash have really shown that free will is very important to this debate. We need to have the basic of autonomy of rights. This is an essential part. Secondly, the government side haven't really told us how we're going to sort out this black market issue that is going to occur from this and make the whole situation worse. And this minority of people who are addicted are going to be affected even more. And finally, there are better economic benefits on our side, and they haven't shown how they're going to, help the economy or anything like that in any way. So we think there's so much more benefits on the opposition side, so I beg you to side with us.